Welcome to Copenhagen, my favorite city in the world. And well, I do live here, so perhaps I am a little bit biased. But since I do live here, why not spend the next 2 hours with me exploring Copenhagen? I'll share all my best tips, the best places to visit, what not to do, show you the daily life here in Copenhagen, and a lot more. There will be timestamps in this video so you can jump around to the parts you are most interested in. But let's just get started, and why not start with one of the first decisions you have to make when visiting Copenhagen: where to stay. This right here is probably the best area to stay in Copenhagen, and it is where most tourists end up staying. But if you do want something a little bit different and a little more unique, then perhaps one of the other 5 areas that we're gonna have a look at today is gonna be for you. Oh, and I'll also share 3 hotel recommendations for each area, so let's just jump in. So the area where most tourists end up staying is Indre By, which translates to the inner city, or basically downtown or the city center. And I mean, it's for good reason that most people end up staying here. All the famous tourist attractions, all the things that you know and have seen about Copenhagen, they're just around the corner. Nyhavn, the Little Mermaid, the Parliament, the beautiful castles, it's all here. And for most visitors, this will just be the best area to stay in, especially if this is your first time visiting, or if you only have a couple of days here in Copenhagen. You are very close to basically everything. All the attractions, you can pretty much walk to whatever you want to do if you're staying here in the inner city. And to me, this, being right in the middle of the action, is the biggest selling point of staying in the city center. You can save a lot of time by being close to everything, and also quite a bit of money since you don't really have to pay for transportation very often. Also, it's just beautiful here. You'll wake up amongst these old buildings and walk the colorful streets as soon as you step out of your hotel. Staying in the city center is a safe bet for everyone coming to Copenhagen. And I do have a whole video all about the city center and the best things and the most famous and the coolest attractions to see and to visit here in Copenhagen. So you can check that out, the link is in the description. So what are the downsides of staying here? Well, as I mentioned, most tourists stay in this area. So even though Copenhagen is not totally overrun by tourists, this is where most of them are. You'll see a lot of the hop-on, hop-off buses and the big tour groups where the guide runs around with a flag and so on. Whereas if you stay in one of the other areas, you won't really see a lot of this, only when you go to visit the attractions in the city center, of course. Okay, but which hotel should you stay in the city center? Well, I haven't stayed in that many hotels here in Copenhagen because, well, I live here. But through some research and recommendations and experiences from friends visiting here, I will give you 3 recommendations in 3 different budgets. I don't include hostels here, but they will likely be the cheapest option, so hop on hostelworld.com if you're looking for that. I also exclude Airbnbs as they are just really expensive, but there will be some apartment-style hotels that are fantastic for families a little later in the video. But onto the budget hotel I recommend in the city center. It's called Wake Up Copenhagen Borgergade. Here you'll get a nice basic room, but really it's the location here that's the awesome part. The price is around 900 Danish kroner or $125 per night, although the prices of course vary throughout the year. That may not sound very budget-like for you, but Copenhagen is a very expensive city, and indeed this is in the lower end for a standard hotel room. For our mid-range option in the city center, we have Hotel Kong Arthur. This hotel is just gorgeous, and it is located in a great area just next to the lakes. The price here is around 1200 Danish kroner or $170 per night. Oh, and I will have links to all of these hotels down in the description so you can check them out if you want. For our luxury stay in the city center, how about staying at the most iconic location in the city, Nyhavn. 71 Nyhavn Hotel is a beautiful 5-star hotel, and if you want a luxury experience, check this place out. The price here is around 2,000 Danish kroner or $285 per night. The second area we will look at today is a little west from the city center and is called Frederiksberg.
Ain't looking for much of many, 'cause we got plenty. No line of division, we're all heaven sent.
Okay, so now we are in Frederiksberg, and I call this the hidden gem because honestly most tourists simply don't go here. And I think there are a couple of reasons for that. There aren't really any of the, the famous tourist attractions out here, and it is just a bit away from the city center. But that doesn't mean that there aren't a good reason to come out here. Now, I might be a little bit biased because I've lived here for around 7 years of my life, but for good reason. It is a fantastic area to live in. And there are a lot of things to do as a tourist.
Show me the right path to walk on, to open our hearts.
For one thing, there are a lot of parks and green areas here in Frederiksberg, more so than other parts in Copenhagen. And right now I'm standing in just this little random park. I honestly don't even know the name, but it's just a cute little park in one of the cool areas in Frederiksberg.
We're finding recipes where cooks at the ready. No spice that we can't use, got the zest for life.
But before we start exploring more Frederiksberg, just a quick note on what Frederiksberg is and perhaps why you should consider staying here. Now, Frederiksberg is a little bit funny because it's actually its own municipality within the city of Copenhagen. So it's basically a city within a city. And it is perhaps a bit of a more fancy area and also one of the more expensive areas of Copenhagen, especially to live. But in turn, it's also just very beautiful and a good place to live and to stay. And there are tons of good places to hang out, nice restaurants and cool independent shops. Instead of in the city center, you get more of the big box chains and so on. If you have more than just a couple of days in Copenhagen, Frederiksberg is actually a pretty good place to stay, as you can get a real good insight into the local life here and how just everyday Frederiksberg people live. But you're still relatively close to all the attractions, and there are still plenty of metro stations around here, so it's super easy. And again, because Copenhagen is so small, everything is just pretty easy to get to. So if you have the time and you want to get a bit more immersed in the culture here, maybe have a look at Frederiksberg. But now it's time to check out more of what this area has to offer. This is Frederiksberg Have, a large, lovely green space in the middle of Frederiksberg. This place is a favorite amongst locals to come here and go for a walk or a run, or even have a picnic, celebrate a birthday, or just have some beers, when the weather is nice at least. On the top of the hill here, overlooking the gardens, sits the beautiful Frederiksberg Castle. It used to be a summer residence for the royal family, but now it is home to an officer school for the Danish army. The Copenhagen Zoo is actually located just around the corner here. And a neat little thing, in this park you can actually get a completely free view of the elephants in the zoo. So let's go check that out. Okay, so of course they weren't out right now, but I've been here before, so let me just put up some footage from when they were actually outside. And you might also see the weather change quite a bit throughout this video. I'm recording this over a couple of days here in spring in Copenhagen. And in just a few days, the weather can basically go from 2, 3, 5 degrees to today, 20 degrees and full sunny. So you always have to be aware of the weather. And of course the parks here are just super nice during the warmer months here in Copenhagen. But also in the winter months, they actually turned this whole area right here into just a big ice skating park. So that's kind of neat. My favorite street in Frederiksberg is probably Frederiksberg Allé, a Paris-inspired avenue. It's home to some beautiful buildings and cozy cafes and places to eat. And speaking of places to eat, since I live in this area, I have tried some of the restaurants around here in Frederiksberg. And these are some of my favorites. And all of these are actually located very close to the Frederiksberg metro station and the Frederiksberg Mall, and could of course be worth visiting even if you're staying in another area as well. The first is Madklubben, which basically translates to the food club. It's just good food, good vibes and fair prices. Bouillon is actually a new place and it's pretty cheap for eating out in Copenhagen. The downside to that is that everything feels a bit rushed and you have to leave after like 90 minutes. But if you want good food at the lowest price, go here. Fortenoa Legner might just have the best pizza in Copenhagen, and that's probably all you need to know about this place. Right, onto the hotel recommendations for Frederiksberg. And for the budget option, we have Cabin Scandinavia Hotel. It's a basic room, not the prettiest on the outside, but at a decent price at around 700 Danish kroner or $100 per night. For the mid-range option, we have Scandic Falconer, a nice location next to all the restaurants I just mentioned, coming in at around 1100 Danish kroner or $155 per night. And for the luxury option, Hotel St. Thomas, a great location and a beautiful hotel, and it can even be cheaper than my mid-range option, but I have it here as they do have some larger rooms that could be great for families, and that will increase the price quite a bit. But for the smallest room, the price starts at around 1000 Danish kroner or $140 per night.
Phone started jumping, what a day. Swear to God I need it now, I can't afford to wait. I just had a
And the next area, Nørrebro.
Told them this would happen and we not a minute late. Seen them down bad, now they tryna hate. Same ones try to hit me for the raise. Got a mill, now they coming with it.
Nørrebro is a very vibrant and perhaps the most distinct area on this list. It feels a bit more raw here and probably a bit more real and not as fairy tale-esque as it can around the city center. It feels like a place regular people live and hang out. Alright, welcome to Nørrebro. This is a very young, vibrant area. I actually have my office right around the corner here because it is such a cool area, and well, I'll be honest, also because it's probably one of the cheaper areas here in Copenhagen, especially for renting out an office. But also you could be able to find some pretty decent food at some pretty good prices compared to at least other parts in Copenhagen. And here in Nørrebro you'll definitely see a lot of graffiti everywhere basically. And a lot of pigeons here at Nørrebro station. Nørrebro is a really cool, colorful area, and there's a lot of parks and small little skate parks right over here, which we'll check out. It's also very culturally diverse. There's a lot of immigrants who settled here, so it means it's probably the most culturally diverse area in Copenhagen, and you'll find cool kebab shops. Probably the best kebab you can find in Copenhagen you'll find right here in Nørrebro. Find just loads of different types of food and just the influence of so many different cultures, which is also part of what makes this place really unique in Copenhagen. And basically where we've been walking now is kind of this green corridor that basically runs through a lot of the city, and so there's a lot of parks kind of adjacent to this big bicycle road. So it's both a big transportation hub, but there's also a lot of cool parks and places to hang out and come skating and just chill, which I think is pretty cool. I mean, it is pretty cold today. It's I don't know, 6 degrees or something, so it's not very crowded out here. But when the weather gets a little bit better, it's a bit sunny, maybe 15, 20 degrees, then people really start coming out and just using and enjoying all of these outdoor spaces. Of course, this is true for all of Copenhagen, but it's just a special, young, vibrant vibe here in Nørrebro. And again, in the summer months, this lawn here would be full with people who are just chilling, having beers, eating some food. Now I see one person with a dog over there. A lot of Nørrebro is just kind of these smaller side streets that are really cozy. Residential areas, but with cafes and bars and small shops and kiosks littered all over. So it's just a really good vibe of how to mix the residential areas, but with usable cafes and places to actually sit and hang out. Like this right here. This right here is the Dronning Louise's Bro, and again, when the weather is super nice, it's gonna be full of people just hanging out, having a beer, chilling. And this is where the Nørrebrogade actually meets the lakes here. And the lakes are also a very famous spot here in Copenhagen. And I mean, I usually come here to just go for a run, just run around the lakes here. It's very popular for that. But also this is where, I guess, so you have Nørrebro on that side, and then right on the other side of the lake, right there is downtown. So I guess this end of Nørrebro probably sees a bit more tourists because, I mean, it's right next to the downtown area. So if this kind of like young, vibrant, like very culturally diverse and perhaps a little colorful and playful vibe, if that sounds like something for you, I'm just gonna give you 3 recommendations for hotels. And actually there aren't like too many hotels around here in Nørrebro because, I mean, it is mostly just a residential area. It's not really, I guess, a tourist area. Of course, some tourists are kind of starting to discover some of the cool spots and coming here to hang out. But it's really not a place where tourists are staying. But if that's for you, here are 3 hotel recommendations. For a budget hotel in Nørrebro, have a look at A&O Copenhagen Nørrebro. Now this might technically be a hostel, but they have a lot of private rooms as well. The location is a bit in the far end of Nørrebro, but if you want to meet other people while staying off the beaten path, have a look at this place. Price is around 900 Danish kroner or $130 per night. For a mid-range option, we have Hotel M18. It's probably not the prettiest of all of the hotels here, but the location is perfect. Price also around 900 Danish kroner or $130 per night. And for luxury on Nørrebro, have a look at Hotel Nora. Again, a great location right on the popular Nørrebrogade. And it has a nice retro Danish design. Price is around 1400 Danish kroner or $200 per night. Up next, we'll head to the hip and trendy Vesterbro. And Vesterbro is a very popular area to stay in, also for tourists. It's very central, there are loads of hotels around here, and it's just so easy to get to. I mean, right now we're at the Copenhagen Central Station, and this is basically the east side of Vesterbro. So right on that side we have Tivoli, and beyond that you're basically in the city center. So you can imagine there's loads of hotels just around here, Central Station. So this is where we're gonna start exploring Vesterbro, and then we're gonna move a little bit into the neighborhood itself and check out some of the cool hidden spots. Vesterbro actually used to be a bit of a rough area in Copenhagen, and although you can still see some remnants of that, the area is very much transformed to a beautiful, safe and expensive part of the city.
I was waiting in the undertow, set adrift with featherweight like bows, unaware of where my heart would flow. I was waiting in the undertow.
And one spot that the locals here really like to come and hang out is this place right here called Helmtall, which is basically just this long strip of greenery here in the middle of the city. So when the weather is nice again, people will just buy a beer in the supermarket and come here and hang out with friends. And it is also right next to probably the most famous area here in Vesterbro, which is Kødbyen, or the meatpacking district, and that is where we'll go next.
Losing my direction, my bearings have me south of home.
Kødbyen is a popular spot for locals and tourists alike to come for food, drinks and some partying. And I think the industrial look here gives this area a very special vibe. And since this area is all about good food and drinks, let's try some. I head to this place called Siesta, which I think is newly opened, and here they sell burgers. So I get a burger, fries and a small craft beer, and I must say it was really delicious. What's perhaps not so delicious is the price, 210 Danish kroner or $30 for this lot. Welcome to Copenhagen. But if you are traveling on a budget or just want to have a very unique experience, I have another recommendation for you here in Vesterbro. We head over to Folkehuset Absalon, which is a community center basically that is located in an old church, which gives it a very unique feeling. They host a ton of events here. I mean, look at this calendar. But what I really love here is the communal dinners. Here you can dine with locals, and as you sit at these large tables, it's very easy to meet and talk to people. Oh, and the price? Just 60 Danish kroner or $9 on Sunday through Wednesday, and Thursday to Saturday 100 Danish kroners or $15. You can also drop by for breakfast or lunch, or like me, just come by for a coffee anytime. This latte set me back 30 Danish kroner. This place is a true gem in Vesterbro.
And Vesterbro really has like a young, cool vibe, and there's a lot of good places to eat, and also quite a lot of the nightlife in Copenhagen is to be found here. A lot of nice bars and also places to really party.
Staying in Vesterbro is a safe bet for most visitors. Plenty of hotel options and very close to the city center, but with its own unique charm, cool places and a fantastic vibe. For a budget hotel here in Vesterbro, we have City Hub Copenhagen. Great location, pretty close to Frederiksberg, so a good option to explore both of these neighborhoods. Some of the rooms here are smaller pod-like rooms with shared bathrooms, so be aware of that. Price around 900 Danish kroner or $130 per night. For a mid-range option, check out Hotel Tiffany. Awesome location, very close to Tivoli, Kødbyen and other cool places, and it has a sleek, modern design. Price 2,000 Danish kroners or $285 per night. Now, if you want the best of the best, Hotel Nimb might be for you. Nimb is basically located alongside Tivoli, and from the rooms you have a view overlooking the Tivoli gardens. This place is true luxury, and you will pay for it. Around 10,000 Danish kroners or $1,400 per night. Yeah, it's that expensive. But if you go to the pinned comment down below, you can actually download this whole guide as a shorter written version. And in there, I do have a secondary luxury option that is quite a bit cheaper. Traveling with kids, or just want to stay in a quiet area away from the tourists and the crowds, then Vesterbro might be for you.
Now we are back here by the lakes, but now we're in Østerbro. So basically, you can see we came from down here is the downtown and Nørrebro that way. So we're just at the north side of the lakes here. And I think Østerbro is a pretty chill area. It's also quite expensive actually. You know, it's a little bit fancy, the buildings are nice, there's a lot of perhaps expensive restaurants and cafes, but it's a really chill vibe. But I think it's very, very good if you are like going as a family. There's some good hotels where you could get like apartments with a kitchen, a few rooms, and it's just quiet. And there might not be like so much going on, but you're still like very, very close to all the attractions and everything you want to see. So it's a pretty good option, especially as a family. But now we're gonna do one of the most popular activities here in Østerbro. So we're gonna go get a coffee right over here and then just take it and hang around, go for a little walk around the lakes. So I managed to get myself a cup of coffee here at this place called Dallas, just around the corner here. It's just a small little coffee place, and it is actually really good. But I guess the problem is it was 45 Danish kroner, so that's like $6 to $7. And like, I mean, in most of the coffee places, that is just the price for coffee here in Copenhagen. It is just really expensive. But now, I mean, the sun's out. I'm chilling here with a cup of coffee just by the lakes here. So that is not too bad. And Østerbro is a really good place for that, to just chill. So you can see, like, this is actually a pretty typical street here in Østerbro. Just a very beautiful, beautiful residential area, and it's just super quiet. I mean, people just live here, so there's not a lot going on. It's really nice and peaceful vibe here. So this street right here is called Ryesgade, and it is probably one of my favorites here in Østerbro. It's a really, again, quiet, like very good looking street. It's very gorgeous, but there's just a lot of cool cafes, a lot of good coffee shops. It's just a very nice place to come hang out if you're staying here in Østerbro. And Another cool thing here in Østerbro is where we are right now. This is called Fælledparken, and it's basically just this huge, big green area, big park. Like you can play people play a lot of sports here. Like you can see there's football fields set up. You know, there's a lot of playground, there's a lake. You know, it's just a good place like to be out in nature, go for a run, go for a walk, do some sports, or just be outside. And this is also where, like right over here, is where the national football stadium of Copenhagen, of Denmark is, I guess. So you could go there and watch a football match, because this is also where FC Copenhagen plays, but I can't really recommend you do that because I'm actually a fan of the rival team called Brøndby. So I can't really say that you should go here, but if you want to watch a football game, you could do that.
For our budget option, we'll be staying on the cool street Ryesgade at Rye 115 Hotel. It has a nice classic Danish design and offers some larger family rooms as well. Prices start at around 1,000 Danish kroner or $140 per night. Our mid-range option might be the perfect spot for a family with kids. Edina Apartment Hotel is in a quiet location and you'll have a full apartment here. Price around 2,000 Danish kroner or $285 per night. For a luxury stay in Østerbro, have a look at Charlottehaven, a beautiful hotel by the waterfront and not too far from the Little Mermaid. Here you'll also have a full apartment. Price is around 3,000 Danish kroner or $430 per night. Next up, probably my favorite area behind Frederiksberg, of course. It's the gorgeous Christianshavn.
Now we visited Nyhavn a little bit earlier in this video, and if I would have to describe Christianshavn, it would probably be like Nyhavn, but with a lot fewer tourists. I mean, you got the canals, the boats, the beautiful old colorful buildings. You just get that same vibe here. But I mean, there's barely any people here. Just, you know, the people who live here, who work here, but the tourists haven't really come to this area. I mean, the tourists that do come out here to Christianshavn, probably most of them come because of Christiania, the free town, which is also located here in Christianshavn.
Hanging out by the canals in summertime is a favorite pastime for us Copenhageners, and a little budget hack here. If eating out every day is a little too expensive for you, go to a supermarket or a 7-Eleven, grab a ready-to-eat meal or a sandwich, maybe a cold beer, and take a seat by the canal. You'll save a lot of money and have a great time.
And I guess technically Christianshavn is actually a part of the downtown area, but it is kind of separated by this bridge, and in general us Danes, we basically see it as its own little area out here. And I mean, again, you are really close to everything and you can just cross the bridge and then you'll be right in the city center. And you also have a metro station right here in the middle of Christianshavn. So it is a very cool location if you want that feeling of Nyhavn, but can't actually stay in Nyhavn or just want the fewer tourists around you. I mean, I guess it wouldn't really be a nice area to stay in Copenhagen without some green spaces. So here we are at the Christianshavns Vold, basically the old moat, I guess. If I have a better word for it, I'll put it up on the screen. But basically it was part of the city of Copenhagen's defenses back in the day. And now it's just like a big park where you can go for a walk and, well, chill out in nature. So right now I'm on my way to probably my favorite area here in Christianshavn. At least my favorite area to go to have food, to hang out with friends and to have some drinks with my friends. So it's called Copenhagen and it's right around the corner from here, I guess in the northern part of Christianshavn. And now there's actually a bridge that connects it right over to Nyhavn. So it's really easy to get to.
Copenhagen is essentially a collection of street food stalls and bars. There's always a great vibe here and the food is delicious. Of course, it is Copenhagen, so don't expect street food to be cheap. Around 100 to 150 Danish kroner for a dish is pretty normal. Street food in Copenhagen is actually pretty close to regular restaurant prices.
It is probably one of the more expensive areas to stay, and there are not a lot of hotels here, mainly because it is just a residential area and there are a lot of offices as well. It's not really a touristy area in that sense, but I will show you the few hotels that are here in just a moment. But you should really consider staying here. I mean, if you want, just look behind me. This kind of view every day you are here. Be very central, be away from the tourists, but also just want some peace and quiet because it is just really quiet and not very busy out here.
The budget hotel here in Christianshavn might just be the coolest one of today. It's called CBH Living and it's a hotel houseboat. Price around 1,600 or $230 per night. Mid-range we'll head to Kanalhuset. This is a beautiful classic Christianshavn building and it's just as gorgeous on the inside. Price 2,000 Danish kroner or $285 per night. For luxury in Christianshavn, head to the NH Collection Copenhagen. This is a very large hotel in a fantastic location and they have a lot of different sized rooms to fit your needs and your budget. Price around 2,200 Danish kroner or $315 per night. Next, we'll look at 31 of the best things to do in the city of Copenhagen, at least according to me. Okay, so the first thing on the list is to do a boat trip around the canals of Copenhagen. It's one of the best ways to see the city, and tourists usually always point to this as one of their highlights of visiting Copenhagen. So I'll recommend you two different ways that you could go about this. There's the cheap way and the not so cheap way. So the cheap way is to get on one of these big boats with a bunch of other people. That will take you around the canals and show you all the cool sights from the water. The price is like 50 Danish kroner per person. And on the boat there is a guide who will tell you all the cool stuff and everything you need to know about all the buildings and stuff that you'll see along the way. The downside is perhaps that there can be quite a lot of other people on the boat as well. And if you're traveling in the most busy periods of the year, you could also expect to have to wait in line simply to get on the boat. But it's cheap, you get to see some cool stuff, and it's just a fantastic tour for most people. But if you want to go the not so cheap route, you could rent a go-boat. Now go-boats are pretty awesome because you get this little boat and you can sail it around the canals all by yourself. It's a lot of fun and you can bring your own food and drinks and basically have a little picnic on board while sailing around the canals. And just go around in your own pace and go see the things that you want to see. The downside is the price. I think it starts at like 600 Danish kroner for an hour. But if you want to have a unique experience, or perhaps if you are traveling as a larger group, it's absolutely worth it. And by the way, my name is Adam and I make videos about traveling and living here in Denmark. So make sure to subscribe if that is interesting to you. Oh, and these 31 things are really in no particular order. They're just things that I really like and that I think that most tourists would enjoy when visiting Copenhagen. Alright, so for number 2, we'll do something a little bit different. We'll be going for a communal dinner at Absalon Folkehus, which is essentially an old church that has been turned into like a community center basically. And this place is great for a few reasons. You'll visit a very cool area of Copenhagen and be inside of an old church. It's also a communal dinner with large tables, so the whole point is to chat with locals and other travelers. And it's cheap. It's like 60 kroner per person, which is very cheap in Copenhagen. You'll need to book your spot online beforehand, and if you can't make it for dinner or perhaps it's sold out, you can also go for breakfast, lunch, or just a cup of coffee. Next is to just rent a bike and ride around the city. No real plan. Just chill, stop for a coffee, stop by the canals and so on. Copenhagen is really a bicycle city, and don't let the angry locals who say, "Oh, tourists should never rent a bicycle here because it might be a minor inconvenience for me," talk you out of it. Of course, if you don't know how to ride a bicycle, it's probably not the best place to learn. And in that case, I would avoid it. And no matter what, you should go online and read up on all the rules and the laws and just how to ride a bicycle around here in Copenhagen. So you'll learn all the hand signals and just all the important things to keep you safe and everyone else safe too. But if you do that, it's a fantastic means of both transportation and to enjoy the city from perhaps its best side. So it's time to try the all-time best Danish food, smørrebrød. It's basically an open-faced sandwich, and if you get one that's really well made, it's just the most delicious thing ever. There are many great places where you can get smørrebrød in Copenhagen. If you go looking, aim for a place that looks a little bit old and traditional, and also that specializes in making smørrebrød. These will often make the best ones. One example is Kanalhuset. This place is great, the food is great, the location is great, and the staff are nice and helpful. Alternatively though, you could make your own smørrebrød and eat like the locals do on a daily basis. If you're staying somewhere with a kitchen, get some rye bread, butter, and whatever you'd like to put on top. It's not as fancy or quite as delicious, but as I mentioned, it's just what a lot of us Danes eat on a daily basis.
And there you have it, a very simple lunch meal. And honestly, it looks kind of boring, but it is delicious.
So it's a cool way to try very local food. The ones that you get at restaurants are, I guess, the fancy versions, and we don't really eat those that often. This next one is a little bit different and probably won't appeal to everyone. But go watch a football match. Football is the biggest sport in Denmark and it means a whole lot to a whole lot of people. The most obvious choice would be to go watch a match with FC Copenhagen, as their stadium is located right in the middle of Copenhagen. But I am a fan of the rival team, so I will have to recommend that to you. Go watch a match in Brøndby. The stadium is only about 30 minutes away from the city center, and you'll have a very unique experience, as really not a lot of other tourists will go watch a match out here. Of course, you will need to find a match that actually takes place while you're here. So if there aren't any with those two teams, you could also check out Lyngby or FC Nordsjælland. Both are also pretty easy to get to from Copenhagen. Canals in Copenhagen are fantastic, and in many places you can actually go swimming in the canals. So if you are here and the weather is nice, definitely go for it. Or just go hang out by the canals. It's really a vibe in the summertime. But you can only swim at the designated swim locations, so Google that beforehand just so you don't swim somewhere where it's illegal. Oh, and if you are going and the weather is not so hot, you could still go for a swim. Winter swimming is actually a very popular activity here in Denmark. Time for some more food, and this place is located right by the canals. Broens Gadekøkken is a fantastic place for street food, drinks, and just hanging out. It's also just very conveniently located. Expect to pay around 100 to 150 Danish kroner for a meal here. In the wintertime, they open up an ice skating ring here instead. So whether you're going in winter or summer or anywhere in between, this is a really great place to visit. And just a short walk away, we will find the iconic Nyhavn. This might be one of the spots that you already know about, but it is also a place to check out no matter what. In summertime, it does get really busy here, but honestly, it's kind of part of the vibe here. Getting something to eat or drink at one of the cafes down Nyhavn is usually a little bit overpriced, but I mean, you are paying for the location, so it might be worth it to just grab a drink and do some people watching at this beautiful, iconic location. Next, we'll head to my favorite park in all of Copenhagen. Frederiksberg Have, or Frederiksberg Garden, is located in the area of Frederiksberg. And it's just a huge, lovely park with a canal, lake, lots of interesting nooks and cool buildings. And on top of the hill overlooking the park, you'll find the Frederiksberg Castle. This is home to the officers' school in the Danish army, so you can't go in here, but it does look pretty good from the outside.
So the Copenhagen Zoo is actually located just around the corner here. And a neat little thing, in this park you can actually get a completely free view of the elephants in the zoo. So let's go check that out.
If you want a bit of nature, this should be top of your list. It's also great to combine a visit here with exploring the area of Frederiksberg itself, which we'll talk about a little bit later. The because now it's time to head into one of Copenhagen's many museums. And the National Museum is one of the best ones in the city. Here you'll learn about the history of Denmark going way back. And of course there is a lot of Viking related stuff in there as well, which is just awesome in my opinion. But you'll go through the history of Denmark all the way up until today. So you can really learn a lot about the country that you're visiting. You could easily spend several hours here, and in general, a museum visit is great for one of the rainy days that you will very likely run into during your visit. So Copenhagen is actually a very, very walkable city. And I mean, if you bring your walking shoes, you could quite easily spend your whole time in Copenhagen without ever really using any sort of transportation. Although driving a bicycle or using the great public transportation are great options as well. And it will give your legs a little bit of rest. But in particular in the city center, just walk around, kind of similar as with the bicycle. Just get a little bit lost, walk down the cool looking side streets, find some awesome shops and cafes, and just get the vibe of the city. And also Copenhagen is just a great and very safe city to just walk around and get lost in. And although getting a bit lost is pretty cool, there is one little street that I recommend you seek out. It's, I think, the oldest, still standing residential street in Copenhagen, called Magstræde. The houses here are from around the 1600s, and the reason that they are some of the oldest is that this street was relatively spared from a lot of the fires and bombardments of Copenhagen, unlike most other parts of the city. So go here and visit this picturesque street and get a feel of what Copenhagen looked like several hundred years ago. And speaking of beautiful buildings, Copenhagen is pretty well known for its architecture. So explore it, old and new. For the old architecture, simply walk around the city center, and seeing many of the places on this list, you will get to explore a lot of it. For modern architecture, there are quite a lot of buildings scattered all around the city. And now I'm probably not the biggest fan of a lot of this, but I know quite a lot of people actually go to Copenhagen for this specific reason. And if you really like this modern architecture, you could try and visit some of the more newly built areas in Copenhagen, like Nordhavn, Ørsted, and visit places like Odetallet. One of the really cool buildings in Copenhagen that actually combines the old and the new is the Black Diamond, or the Royal Library. It's a very old library that got expanded with a very modern style, and it just works really well. It is a pretty cool place to visit. You can of course do library stuff here. There's a cafe and you can just walk around and explore the building or hang out by the canal outside. Okay, let's explore a different part of the city of Copenhagen.
All right, welcome to Nørrebro. This is a very young, vibrant area. I actually have my office right around the corner here because it is such a cool area. And well, I'll be honest, also because it's probably one of the cheaper areas here in Copenhagen, especially for renting out an office. But also you could be able to find some pretty decent food at some pretty good prices compared to at least other parts in Copenhagen. And here in Nørrebro, you'll definitely see a lot of graffiti everywhere, basically. And Nørrebro is like a really cool, colorful area, and there's a lot of parks and small little skate parks, like right over here, which we'll check out. A lot of Nørrebro is just kind of these smaller side streets that are really cozy, you know, residential areas, but with cafes and bars and small shops and kiosks littered all over. So it's just a really good vibe of how to mix the residential areas, but with usable cafes and places to actually sit and hang out. Like this right here.
Tivoli is the second oldest still running amusement park in the world. And it's also just one of the most popular attractions in all of Copenhagen. And personally, I just love Tivoli. I've been coming here pretty much every year since I was a kid. It's kind of a family tradition, I guess. From trying the rides, eating good food, or just strolling around and enjoying the park and the beautiful lights, Tivoli is just pretty great. The only real downside is the price. It's just mega expensive. You'll have to pay for the entrance, a ride pass, if you want to try the rides, as paying for single tickets for the rides is almost as expensive as buying the ride pass. And then you will need to buy all the food and drinks and snacks inside of Tivoli, which are also really quite expensive. So if you are like visiting as a family, you could easily expect to spend hundreds of dollars. But it's just one of those things that's still probably worth it. Okay, time to visit another museum. This time we're going to Glyptoteket. This is the most aesthetically pleasing museum in Copenhagen. The main focus of this museum is sculptures. And not only are the sculptures here beautiful, they're also just presented fantastically and in gorgeous rooms and buildings. Oh, and a pro tip, if you are looking for souvenirs, have a look in the shops of all of the museums. Usually they have some pretty cool and unique items to bring home. Okay, if you're staying in Copenhagen for like maybe 5 days or longer, you could probably consider doing a day trip outside of Copenhagen. There are so many options to choose from, and there are just a lot of cool things to do within quite a short distance of the city. But I will recommend visiting the island of Møn. This is one of the most beautiful areas in Denmark and home to Møns Klint, which is a very unique spot here. To get here, you will probably need to rent a car though, or do like an arranged tour. But I will be making a full video about the island of Møn, how to get there, how to get around, what to do, all the cool things to see. So hit the subscribe button if you want to see that. Back in Copenhagen, we'll now want to visit the area of Christianshavn. It's technically a part of the city center, but generally we consider it its own little area within the city. If you like the look in Nyhavn, you'll really love this area. It has that same vibe, but it's just a larger area and not just one street. And there are a lot fewer tourists here, especially down all the side streets. This is also where you'll find Christiania, the well-known free town. And I mean, if you are in the area, you could swing by, but usually it's not an area that I really recommend that often, just because it is a little bit overhyped and it is just not really a lawless place that you will often see online. So most people do get a little bit disappointed when visiting. But the area of Christianshavn is awesome. And one place that you should visit in the area of Christianshavn is the church Vor Frelsers Kirke. In another video I made, I ranked a lot of the popular attractions in Copenhagen, and this place is at the top of my list. The church has a pretty tall and gorgeous spire, and you're actually able to go up there. So you'll be climbing inside the church first until you reach, I guess, the bottom of the spire. And from here, you'll be walking on the outside of the spire on this little path that just gets narrower and narrower towards the top. But from here, you will have one of the best views overlooking the city of Copenhagen. I can't recommend this place enough. It's really awesome. Of course, if you are terrified of heights, this might not be the place for you, as the fence is really not that tall and the path is so narrow. So like sometimes you just have to kind of squeeze past another person going the opposite direction. But for you, I do have another option for a great view overlooking the city, and we'll get to that in just a little bit. But remember how we visited the Frederiksberg Gardens a little bit earlier? Now it's time to explore the rest of the area of Frederiksberg. And Frederiksberg is actually its own municipality within the city of Copenhagen. And this is also where I have lived for the past, I guess, 7 or 8 years. So I may be a little bit biased in saying that this is the best area of Copenhagen. But the whole area is just really beautiful, and not a lot of tourists actually come out here. The streets are gorgeous, there are loads of great restaurants, a lot of unique shops and boutiques. So don't miss out on this unique part of Copenhagen. Time for more food. And this time we're heading to Kødbyen, which is an old meatpacking district that is now home to, I guess, a lot of cool restaurants, bars, cafes and clubs. So a lot of people come here to party on the weekends, but we're just going to check out some food. So here I'm at a place called Siesta and just have a great burger, fries and a beer. There's always a pretty great vibe in this area, and whether you're into nightlife or just some food, it's worth a visit. The The Little Mermaid is probably another one of those places that you have heard about before coming to Copenhagen. And I mean, it's just a little statue, and for a lot of people it might be a little bit underwhelming seeing it. But I still think that it's one of the best things to do here in Copenhagen, as most people already know about it, so it's just pretty fun to see. But also because pretty much right next to it you'll find some other cool places that you could easily visit and combine with a visit to the Little Mermaid. So check out, for example, Castellet, which is right next door, and walk around the area of Nyboder. So go snap a photo with the Little Mermaid, but spend more time visiting those other places just around the corner. Okay, this is the second option for a great view overlooking the city of Copenhagen, the Round Tower. This place is a lot more well known, and it is located right in the middle of the city center, but you get a very nice view of the city from up here. Although you're not going to be up as high as in the church we saw, but at the same time it's not as scary at all if you're a little bit afraid of heights. There are really large fences and you can't really get close to the edge of the tower at all. The price is also very reasonable at just 40 kroner per person to get up here. And I mean, it could even be worth visiting both of those places, as the Round Tower is just a very unique and beautiful building. The Botanical Garden in Copenhagen is pretty awesome. And it's free. At least the outside part of it is. And here you'll just find a great park basically, but also a bunch of beautiful plants and flowers and a lot of small paths that lead you through the garden. It's even a cool place where people just come to hang out. There is also a part of the Botanical Garden where you have to pay to enter. It's this building right here, called the Palm House. Inside you'll find a lot of tropical plants that obviously can't survive outside here in Denmark, and it's actually really nice to just walk around in here. There's also this cool walkway where you'll be walking around the top of the trees and palms. If you're into parks, plants or butterflies, you should visit this place. Copenhagen has a pretty great coffee culture, and there are a lot of fantastic cafes and coffee shops. Honestly, you should just go on Google Maps and look at, well, the places that are close to where you're staying. You'll pretty much be sure to find something great within walking distance.
So I managed to get myself a cup of coffee here at this place called Dallas, just around the corner here. It's just a small little coffee place, and it is actually really good. But I guess the problem is it was 45 Danish kroner, so that's like $6 to $7. And like, I mean, in most of the coffee places, that is just the price for coffee here in Copenhagen. It is just really expensive.
If you go to the Danish Parliament Christiansborg and then go in behind it, you will find the Royal Library Garden. This is a small park that feels a bit hidden, and it has a very cozy vibe to it, and it's just beautiful here. It's just another great little spot to go and grab a picture and just sit, relax, and do some people watching. And rest your legs after you've been walking around for a long time. Amalienborg is home to the royal family, and it's one of those beautiful places that you likely won't miss on your trip to Copenhagen. But specifically, you should try and catch the changing of the guard that happens every day around 12 AM. Of course, I just found out that I have no actual footage of this, but perhaps that will make the experience a little bit more unique for you. And right next to Amalienborg, you'll find probably the most beautiful church in Copenhagen, the Marble Church. I really don't have a lot to say about this one. It's just gorgeous on the outside as well as the inside. And again, it's one of those places that you just won't miss on your trip coming here, for good reason. And it's time for some more food. Torvehallerne is a large food market right in the city center. Here you can buy both groceries as well as just ready-to-eat meals, I guess. So there's always a decent mix of locals and tourists, and a lot of people just come here to relax and have a drink or a small meal or a snack. Now, Torvehallerne does focus more on using like high quality ingredients and foods, so do expect to pay a premium for that. But even if you are on a budget trip, you should swing by and just have a walk around and enjoy this place and the vibe. And why not end on a museum? And better yet, a museum that's completely free. The David Collection is a really cool little museum, again in a very convenient location. The focus here is mainly on Islamic art, which is really quite unique for a museum in Copenhagen. And again, it's free, so do not hesitate to visit this one. Okay, it's time for some practical tips for your visit. Here are some important tips to know. Number one is to take the metro from the airport. This is probably the most asked questions when people visit Copenhagen. How do I get from the airport to my hotel? And 99% of the time the answer is taking the metro. It's really easy, just follow the signs in the airport, you buy a ticket right there. There's even some people you can ask if you're in doubt what to do. And if you're staying in and around the city center, it's gonna take you about 20-25 minutes to get to your hotel. Number two is to not buy the Copenhagen card. Now the Copenhagen card is like, you buy a card, you get transportation and a lot of activities are included. But it's also really expensive. Now perhaps for you it might make sense to buy it, but you will need to do just a lot of activities and visit a lot of museums. But the other reason is that I think it's actually a little bit misleading with the Copenhagen card. So I just did a lot of tests on the website. For example, here I looked at 4 very popular tourist attractions in Copenhagen, plugged them in, and it shows me the normal price and then the price I will pay with the Copenhagen card. The problem was when I then went to the website of each of these attractions and just looked at the cost, added up, it totaled half of what the Copenhagen card says is the normal price. I'm sure they have some way of calculating this, and it's including transportation and whatnot. But for a lot of these attractions, you would simply just walk between them because they are really close. And you can really just get misled a bit into thinking you're getting a good deal, when perhaps you're not. And number 3 is to walk. Walk between all the attractions you want to see. If you're able, of course. In my opinion, in Copenhagen, you'll see a lot of the cool things and get the best experience in between the major attractions. Sure, there are some awesome places, but it's when you walk and get a little bit lost down the side streets and find a cool little bakery and things like that, that you'll really start to love the place. Number 4, don't research too much. Now, I know it's a little bit ironic because if you're watching this, you're probably doing some research on your Copenhagen trip, and it's not a bad thing. But I mean, it's like not overdoing it. Like you don't need to watch 100 videos or have every single minute planned out or know the layout of Copenhagen by hand before you leave. Allow yourself to get a little bit surprised. Have a solid plan, but again, just don't overdo it. And here walking is great because you will just get surprised and see a lot of cool places that you haven't seen on YouTube or social media beforehand. Number 5 is to not jam-pack your itinerary. So I'm in a lot of like Copenhagen groups on Facebook and other places. And again, one of the most asked questions is like people write out their full itinerary and ask if this is a good plan. And almost all of them have every single day planned out from 8 AM to 8 PM and have way too many activities. Again, allow yourself a little bit of breathing room. You need time to have lunch. You need time to just chill, sleep in a little bit maybe. And of course, allow yourself to get surprised. So just slow down a little bit. Okay, number 6 is how to save a bit of money on food, because eating out in Copenhagen is really expensive. Now, if you're staying in a place that has a kitchen, just cook something for yourself. That will be way cheaper. But if you're staying in a regular hotel, you probably won't have a kitchen. So if you want just some cheaper meals that don't have to be anything spectacular, head to 7-Eleven, or even better, just all the regular supermarkets. A lot of them have like a section with some ready-to-eat meals that could be sandwiches or salads or something like that. And usually it's pretty cheap. And then you can just take that out, sit by the canals and enjoy your meal at a wonderful location. Number 7 is when should you visit? Now, if you can go any time of the year, I always recommend like the warmer months. Going in summer is just better because it gets really cold here, it's rainy and windy. And especially in Copenhagen, the town just really comes alive during the summer months. July and August are probably the busiest and the most expensive, but you'll also have the highest chance of some nicer weather. But May and September, I think, are perhaps the hidden gems of when to visit. Copenhagen. If you have to visit in the winter, go in December because you really get a bit of Christmas vibe going on all around the city. The rest of the winter months are pretty boring and the weather is terrible. Number 8, how long should you stay? Now, Copenhagen is really not that big of a city, but there's a lot going on, so if you have like 3 full days, you'll probably see all the major attractions and get all the things done that you want to do. But again, if you're just transiting and have like a one-night stay here, in one day you can see quite a lot in Copenhagen. I mean, just having a day walking all around the city, you can really experience quite a lot. Of course, with more time you can see more, then you can do trips outside of Copenhagen to see a bit more of what Denmark is like, and perhaps get a bit more immersed outside of the main tourist attractions. But for most people, 3 days up to a week would probably be ideal. Number 9. Okay, there's no need to take out cash when you're in Denmark. Of course you can if you want to, but you will of course have to pay the fees for taking out the cash. You can pay with cash pretty much anywhere in Copenhagen, so don't worry about that if you like having cash. But you can also pay with your card everywhere. So especially if you're on a shorter trip, just use your card. And that leads us to number 10, which is all about the tipping culture here in Copenhagen and in Denmark. So tipping in Denmark is not expected. I guess you could say it's appreciated, but not expected. So if you think your restaurant bill is extremely high and you don't really want to add an extra 10, 15, 20% to that, it's no problem that you don't tip. Of course, if you get great service, then go ahead and tip. But keep in mind that if you tip, say, $10, usually they won't just go to that waiter that you tip. Normally, tips in Denmark are like shared. So the whole team of the restaurant will share the tips at the end of the day. And quite often you might find that if you pay with card at a restaurant that, you know, when you type in your PIN and everything, that it will ask you to add a tip or not. And again, it could be a little bit awkward when the waiter is standing there with the machine and you just press no to adding a tip. But again, it's really no problem and it's very normal. Tip if you get awesome service and don't if you don't. Number 11, is it safe and what are the scams in Copenhagen? So Copenhagen is probably one of the safest cities in the world. But of course you should always be aware of pickpockets. I think mainly probably in the metro if it's like really crowded, or perhaps at the Copenhagen Central Station is where pickpocketing usually happens. So just like be aware of all your stuff. And there really aren't that many scams in Copenhagen. I think one of the more normal ones, I have had it happen to me once, is like someone will come up to you and perhaps ask for directions or ask you to look at a map or kind of get your attention away. And then a second person will, you know, try to approach you from behind, perhaps to pickpocket you from your pockets or your bag or whatever. But really, most areas of Copenhagen are very safe at all times of the day or night. Number 12, don't sleep entirely on going outside of Copenhagen. I think foreigners coming to Denmark really mostly only know about Copenhagen, and most will just stay in Copenhagen. But there is a lot to do outside of Copenhagen and plenty of like cool day trips that you could do. So don't completely neglect setting aside one day to going somewhere outside of Copenhagen. And hey, subscribe to this channel if you want to see some of those, as I will be showing you what kind of day trips that you could be doing in the future. Number 13, rent a bicycle. Now for some reason, again, a lot of Danes actually recommend tourists not to rent a bicycle when visiting Copenhagen, even though it is such a bike-friendly city. And the reason that a lot of Danes don't recommend it is that they use the bicycle as a means of transportation from getting to work, getting home, etc. So people drive very, I guess, straightforward, and they don't like if there's tourists kind of driving slowly on the street, and it can be a bit dangerous and so on. But again, I think people need to chill a little bit. Of course, if you don't know how to ride a bicycle, maybe it's not the best place to learn, but it is an awesome way to explore a city and get around cheaply. Just read up on the rules on how you should ride a bicycle in Copenhagen so that you are safe and so that everyone else is safe. But if you do that, go for it. 14 is the weather. Now, as I record this, it's like the middle of June, and right now the weather is horrible. It feels like it's autumn. We're wearing like big jackets when we go outside, and it's raining through half the day, and then suddenly it's sunny and kind of warm. So it's just very unpredictable and usually not for the better. So when you're packing, prepare for everything. It could be 25 degrees and you'd be wearing shorts and t-shirts, or it could be 12 degrees and you need a good jacket, because it does get really cold, especially with the wind. Number 15 is to take a canal cruise. A lot of the foreigners I speak to always say that the canal cruise was the highlight of their experience in Copenhagen, because you just get to see a big part of the city in a unique way, of course, from the water. And I'd say there are like two different ways that you could do this. There's the budget option and then the, I guess, fancy option. So the budget option is those big boats with a lot of tourists in them, and they're pretty cheap. I don't even know, it's like $10, $15 or something for a ticket. And you know, there's a guide kind of explaining as you sail throughout. And that's an awesome experience. If you want like a bit more of a private and chill experience, you can actually rent what is called a go boat, which will probably cost around $100, perhaps a little bit more. And you sail this boat yourself all around the canals of Copenhagen. If you are going a group of people, like 5, 6, 7, 8 people, then sharing this cost will actually almost even out to as if you were going on the big boat. And it is really cool. You could just bring some drinks and some food, and then you just chill as you sail around the canals. Number 16. Copenhagen is really expensive. Expect to spend $100 to $200 per night for a hotel, and like $10 to $20 for every meal. And a lot of activities aren't really that cheap either, so it just adds up really quickly. But luckily there are a lot of free things to do in Copenhagen, and in my Copenhagen travel guide I do show a lot of these, so you can watch that later. The link is down in the description. Number 17. Here are some useful apps that you could use throughout your visit in Copenhagen. Now, the first one is called journeyplanner.dk, and this one is related to public transportation. So it's really cool. You just plug in where you want to go, and then the app will show you how to get there using public transportation and how much it will cost. It's really useful and very friendly towards tourists. And in that same arena, you just use your Google Maps or whatever maps app you use. It's always great to like download the map of the place you're going to, so that if you get lost, you can still find your way back and have the areas or locations that you want to visit are kind of saved. And it's also useful if you want to look up restaurants that are nearby or activities, see how they're rated, and you can easily find the cost from there and everything. Next one is called DOT Tickets, and with this app you can really just buy tickets for public transportation. Again, it's very straightforward. You just plug in your trip and then you get a ticket, and if an inspector comes on the train, you just show them the ticket on your phone. Now, usually I don't recommend renting a car if you're visiting Copenhagen. It just really doesn't make a lot of sense. But perhaps you might need to, or if you plan on visiting a lot of places outside of Copenhagen, it can make sense in some cases. So if you rent a car, the app EasyPark is what you should get. And basically it will just help you pay for parking and make sure you have your parking ticket wherever you are parked. Number 18 is the must-eat food items when you visit Copenhagen. So the first one is called smørrebrød. It's really an open-faced sandwich on rye bread, and it is really good. There are plenty of awesome restaurants that will serve this throughout Copenhagen. And again, if you have a hotel with a kitchen or an Airbnb, you could try your hand at making some yourself. Next up is to get a hot dog from a classical hot dog stand in Copenhagen. Yes, they really are that good. And finally, try a lot of pastries in Copenhagen. There are so many awesome bakeries and they make some really, really delicious pastries. Again, all of this will probably get a little bit expensive, but it will be worth it. Trust me. Number 19. A lot of museums in Denmark are actually free on Wednesdays. Now, it's a little bit different for each museum, if it's every Wednesday or like the first Wednesday of every month or however they run it. But if there are some museums that you know you want to visit, then just look on their website and check if they are free on a Wednesday and if that collides with when you're visiting. Again, another little money-saving hack. And the final tip is to stay centrally in Copenhagen. So stay around the city center. For most people, this will be the best choice.
as you will just be close to everything. And you can basically walk everywhere, walk to all the cool tourist attractions and places that you want to see. Again, further cementing that you probably don't need the Copenhagen card, and it will save you a lot of money on public transportation.
But there are some classic mistakes that I see a lot of tourists make when visiting Copenhagen. Here are 9 of the most typical ones and how to avoid them. The first mistake tourists make when visiting Copenhagen is to not rent a bicycle. It is just the best way to get around the city and to explore the city as well. Now, if you look around online or watch videos like this one, you'll often see that especially Danish people or people from Copenhagen will tell tourists to never rent a bicycle in Copenhagen. And the reason for that is that they think it's very dangerous, both for the tourists and for the people living in Copenhagen, because it can be a minor inconvenience for the locals having tourists riding around on a bicycle because they're trying to get to and from work, and then there's someone just riding around their city chilling. And part of that argument is pretty good. It can be very dangerous both for the tourists and for everyone else if you, the tourist, don't know how to ride a bicycle or just don't read up on the rules for riding a bicycle in Copenhagen. Because we use a bicycle as a means of transportation, we do go very fast and we are pretty merciless when riding a bicycle. So dangerous situations do happen quite a lot, and often they include tourists. So it's things like just stopping in the middle of the street, or not signaling when turning, or just swirling around on the bicycle lane, or not even knowing where the bicycle lane is. But honestly, if you just spend a little bit of time learning about the rules, and of course, if you know how to ride a bicycle, then renting a bicycle and riding around the city is just the best thing to do, in my opinion. And the second mistake is actually a bit along those lines. It's listening perhaps a little bit too much to people like me or videos like this, because a lot of these tips will, for example, tell you not to have a beer or eat at Nyhavn because it's a little bit more expensive, or to not visit specific places like Strøget, which is like a very famous long shopping street, or even not to visit the Little Mermaid because it's just a tiny little statue. And often a lot of these tips comes from locals like me, but I think we need to realize that the experience of a tourist and what they want to do and want to see is going to be different than what a local wants to do in just their day-to-day life. So just because I would not usually go and hang out on Strøget doesn't mean that a tourist would not like to see it. And I don't find the Little Mermaid particularly interesting either, but if you walk from the city center up to the Little Mermaid, the walk is actually very interesting, and there's a lot of things you see along the way to getting there that you just probably otherwise would not see. And sometimes those very popular attractions, they are just popular for a reason, especially with tourists, because that is why they are coming to this place. It's because they have heard about the Little Mermaid, they have seen Nyhavn and want to, sit there and have a beer and just people watch and enjoy their time in Copenhagen. So don't listen too much to people like me. And the third mistake that tourists often make is buying the Copenhagen card. In my opinion, for most people, it's just not worth it. Like, you would need to just do a whole lot of activities and visit so many museums in a very short time frame that it just wouldn't be that enjoyable. You would just be crossing places off a bucket list basically and not really enjoying every place. But also, if you use the Copenhagen Card's website, and they have like a price calculator to see if it's worth it for you, but if you use it, like, I'm not really sure what method they use to calculate the prices, but when I have looked at, I guess, the original price of entering all these places and then adding them up, usually the price I get is like half of what the Copenhagen Card tells you the original price is. So you might think you're getting a very good deal when in reality you might not be. Sure, it can be nice that like transportation is included and you don't have to think about it when you're going hopping on the metro because you already have that ticket, but you are most likely going to be paying a premium just for that feeling, and it really is not that hard just buying a ticket when you want to use public transportation. Next mistake is staying only in Copenhagen. Now, if you're coming to Copenhagen for just a couple of days, then please only stay in Copenhagen. You won't really have time to go on any day trips or anything. But if you have more time, let's say a week or even more, then you should really consider going outside of Copenhagen on a day trip or two, as there's just so much more to Denmark than Copenhagen, despite the fact that we are such a small country. There's so many cool things to see, and a lot of the day trips are really worth it. And yeah, consider subscribing if you want to see some of those day trips and see more of both Copenhagen, but also more of Denmark in general and the places that you could be visiting on a day trip. Like right now, I'm on the island of Møn in southern Denmark, which is probably one of the more beautiful places in Denmark and the most unique places as well. And I think like for us people who live in Copenhagen, this is very far away. It's like an hour and a half drive from Copenhagen to get here. And because we are such a small country, that's a very long distance for us. But I mean, if you're coming for a larger country, that might just be your daily commute. So it's not really that big of a deal. And just going an hour or an hour and a half trip to see something very special, that could be worth it. So consider subscribing to my channel if you want to see a video here from the beautiful island of Møn and more places around both Copenhagen and all over Denmark. And the next mistake is just packing all the wrong clothing. The weather in Denmark is just all over the place. Of course, it depends on the season you're going, but packing the right clothing is really important because you will probably be spending a lot of time outside and perhaps biking or walking around the city. So having good clothing will really save you. And generally, you would probably need a little bit of everything. So, I mean, right now it's like late June and the weather is not too bad, but it's still kind of cold. I really need a jacket right now. And later in the evening, I would probably need an even bigger jacket, or even better, just have multiple layers that you can take on and off during the day. And also be prepared for rain, because it just rains a lot. So having an umbrella or a rain jacket or something is really gonna help you. And usually it also just feels quite a bit colder than perhaps the weather forecast will say that it is. And often it's because of the wind. The wind is just unbearable. So be prepared for it to be a little bit colder than what you would expect. Okay, here are just some general etiquette tips perhaps. So it's like smaller mistakes that tourists make. I just bundled them into one here. The first one is when you're on an escalator, you stand on the right side so people can walk on the left side. So if you're in a rush, you can walk quickly or run on the left side, and people who are just chilling stand on the right side. And when you want to get on the bus or the metro, then wait for people to actually get out of the metro before you start going in. People will get really mad when they're trying to exit the metro and a tourist is just already walking in. That is a bad thing to do in Copenhagen. And it might be a smaller thing, but when you are like in the metro, for example, or just in smaller spaces with a lot of people, then try not to like talk or yell super loudly or be loud or listen to music. That's even the worst one. Danes are a little bit weird with that, so just don't be overly loud. And the next mistake is expecting a visit to Copenhagen to be cheap. Like doing a budget trip in Copenhagen is just really, really difficult. And that's mainly because accommodation and food is just very expensive and there aren't really a lot of budget options here. Now I do have a full video on how to do Copenhagen more on a budget. So if you want some more tips, you can watch that video later. But even if you're like staying at hostels and cooking for yourself, which is gonna be the cheapest way you could do Copenhagen, it's still not gonna be very cheap compared to many other places. And if you are a more, I guess, standard tourist staying at a standard hotel and eating out a little bit, then it is just going to be expensive. Now, luckily, there are quite a lot of free activities that you can do, and a lot of the sightseeing and just walking around the city can be all free, and like renting a bicycle is not that expensive. So you could do a lot of activities for free, which is always great. But food and accommodation is just going to be expensive. And the next mistake is kind of just sticking to all the major attractions. So what I mean by that is a lot of tourists, before coming to Copenhagen, they might have a list of what they want to see and do. And you know, they'll just travel between these places and then crossing off their list. And they'll miss out all the cool stuff in between. And that's why I really recommend renting a bicycle or just walking to most places if you can, because you will see a lot of really, really cool stuff and just random stuff and buildings that are awesome and cool small little museums or in shops that you have no idea even existed. So if you are the type of person who likes to make an itinerary and have a lot of things planned out,
then perhaps plan out some time for being surprised or just walking around. But even just walking between the major attractions is going to get you really far to avoiding this mistake. And finally, the last mistake for today is tourists who stay just only around the city center. Now, don't get me wrong, the city center is awesome, it's beautiful, there are a lot of things to do, and most of the famous attractions are just located around here. So it's really easy to just stay in this small part of Copenhagen and not really seeing anything else. But for example, if you are visiting in summer, this is pretty much exactly what all tourists are doing. So the tourism is just really concentrated. And if you want to see some different parts and more unique parts of Copenhagen, then head out to some of the other areas of Copenhagen. There's just so much to see and do that most tourists simply never will, because they stay only around the city center. Copenhagen is known for being a very sustainable city and having many initiatives to, well, make the city greener. Here is one recent example of how they involve tourism in this. Copenhagen will give you free food, drinks and activities if you act sustainably on your visit. That's the headline of a new project in the city of Copenhagen meant to promote sustainable tourism. So today we'll dive a little bit deeper than just the headline and see what this is really all about, what you can actually get and what you have to do, but also a little bit about the motivation and implication of it. Okay, so lately this pilot project made by Wonderful Copenhagen, the official tourism organization of Copenhagen, has been getting a lot of media attention, especially from international media. Copenhagen to reward eco-friendly tourists with free food and tours is the headline from CNN. And that sounds awesome, but remember, this is a small little pilot project that only runs about a month from today, actually the 15th of July until August 11. But of course the hope is that it will be a big success and that they can continue and expand further down the line. But since it is like a small project, there's actually only 24 attractions involved in this project. And we'll have a look at exactly what these attractions are and what they offer a little bit later in the video. But if you are new here, my name is Adam and I'm a Copenhagen local, and I make videos here on YouTube all about traveling and living in Copenhagen and Denmark. So if that sounds like an interest to you, then consider subscribing and sticking around. But going back to that headline from CNN, so what exactly is eco-friendly tourism? Well, according to this project, things like biking or taking public transportation is. In fact, these two activities are what will give you access to pretty much all of the rewards involved in this project. So you basically show up to one of the attractions, show a picture of your bicycle or your train ticket, and then you get the reward. It is like built on a bit of a trust basis, because I mean, you could just grab a picture of any bike on Google, I suppose. But my problem with this is that I think most tourists coming to Copenhagen already take a bicycle or public transportation to get around the city. And I mean, what about those who walk? Like, renting a car in Copenhagen is just very expensive and very impractical and inconvenient. I think most people who actually rent a car when they go to Copenhagen do so they can visit places outside of Copenhagen as well. So like, are you really turning those few tourists who come to Copenhagen and rent a car towards renting a bicycle instead by offering them a free cup of coffee? I don't know. Don't get me wrong though, as I might already sound a little bit negative, doing something is of course often always better than doing nothing. Even though I personally might not think that this project will have like a huge environmental impact. Now I do want to question the motivation a little bit perhaps. As I mentioned, this project is made by Wonderful Copenhagen, the official tourism organization of Copenhagen. And I mean, they have one goal: to get tourists to come to Copenhagen. And being a sustainable city is these days just a very hot term and something very attractive for tourists when they are picking their next destination. So let's just call this for what it really is. It's marketing. Now, can you market yourself while still doing something good? Sure, and I'm sure that's what they're going for here. I don't think that wonderful Copenhagen are just like evil or scheming. I do believe that they want to do better and want to do more good things for the environment here in Copenhagen. The problem is that in the big picture, your trip from, let's say, the US traveling here to Copenhagen, that's really what's gonna hurt the environment, and not whether you choose a bicycle over a car or a taxi for traveling a few kilometers. And on wonderful Copenhagen's website, they actually have this like Q&A question here. So I'll just read this. So there's one of the questions they have is, how does Copenhagen, oh yeah, the project is called Copenhagen. I probably forgot to mention that. So how does Copenhagen specifically contribute to reducing Copenhagen's carbon footprint? And the answer is Copenhagen encourages the use of bicycles, public transportation, and participation in environmental activities which collectively reduce the city's carbon emissions by promoting greener modes of transportation and waste reduction. However, the environmental burden of transportation to and from Copenhagen is much more significant than that of local transportation. Consequently, Copenhagen is marketed only in Copenhagen to encourage both visitors and locals to make more sustainable choices. Okay, so at least they acknowledge this problem themselves. But I mean, we just saw CNN and other international news media cover this project. So like, could this project end up having the exact opposite effect of what they're actually trying to achieve? Like, if the attention and intention of this project will help bring just a few more tourists to Copenhagen, the project might end up being responsible for more CO2 emissions than they help reduce with the project. Now, probably those people who will visit Copenhagen would probably have gone somewhere else, but it's still an interesting thought, I think. Yeah, but let me know in the comments what you think. Like, does it even matter in the big picture? Is this a fantastic thing? Is it like a great start to something bigger? But anyway, let's head on inside and have a look at the exact attractions involved in this project. Alright, let's have a look at all of the attractions included. So we head over to copenpay.com, which will take us to this website right here. And of course here we can also see just all the information and all what we need to know about using this system and how it works and all of that. But if we then scroll down here, we get a map of all of the attractions included, and we can also get them in list view. But let's start here with the map. And I won't like look at all of them because a lot of them are like very similar, so we can easily group them together a bit. But let's just start with this one here. This is the National Gallery of Denmark. This is actually a very nice museum that you should consider visiting. So they're a part of this project. And how they are a part of this project is that you can bring some plastic waste on a specific day in a specific time frame, and then you can be a part of like a workshop where you then turn this plastic waste into some sort of art. I mean, this sounds like a pretty great activity, but of course, if you then start reading a little bit, then you will quickly find out, or I mean, you'll see that in the bottom, that the workshop is open to all ages after purchasing entry to the museum. So I mean, you still need to buy a ticket to get into the museum to do this. Okay, but let's move on. Here is a rooftop bar and terrace, and this can easily be grouped with like the other cafes, restaurants that are also here on the list. And here the description is you just arrive by bike or public transportation and then you get a free drink. Again, I feel that people who are walking, which are probably most, are being left out a little bit because, I mean, that's probably the most environmentally friendly way to travel around the city. This is, of course, pretty nice. You get a free drink. A couple more museums to have a look at. The Museum of Copenhagen. Get a free cup of coffee when you purchase an entrance. The National Museum, which is an awesome museum, by the way, again, arrive sustainably and you will get a free ice cream. Now, I know that they have a little shop outside the museum, which could be where you get the ice cream, but it doesn't specifically mention because they also have a shop inside. So here it's a bit unclear if you actually need to go inside and purchase a ticket or if you can get the ice cream outside. And I just noticed actually up here on the how it works, they actually specifically mentioned that you can get a free entrance to a museum. I can't find that. None of the museums here on this list will get you a free entrance if you arrive sustainably. There's another one out here actually, Cisternerne, which is a really cool place out in Frederiksberg. Again, it's arrived sustainably, but here they also include foot traffic. And here you get a free introduction to an exhibit that they have down here. But if you then want to see it, then you have to purchase a ticket to get inside. Folkehuset Absalon is a really cool place that I always recommend. You can have like awesome social dinners. It's a really cool place to visit. They have some special breakfasts that are like in this project that are then like extra cheap. They're all sold out by now. So now one of the cool ones actually here on this list is
go boat. So it's these small little private boats that you can rent and then sail around the canals. It's really awesome and a great activity to do no matter what. And here you can get a free 1-hour boat tour. So now we're talking, right? That's a pretty good reward here for being sustainable. There are limited spots available though, and you do have to like fill out this stuff here to get a spot, and it will probably sell out pretty fast. Speaking of boat tours, we also have this Strommer. They do like the more regular boat tours, the bigger boats that you often see sailing around the canals. Here you can also get a free boat tour. It's like valid on, well, every day in the period the project runs at a specific time frame. And I just had a look around. It's almost sold out for all the days throughout the project. I think the last couple of days are still available. Then we also have Green Kayak, where you basically rent a kayak for free, and as payment you have to collect trash along the way. It's a super cool concept and thing to do, but I guess the thing is that's what they always do. Like, it's the exact same concept they have outside of this project, but it's still very cool. Oh, and the last one I want to just mention is the Donkey Republic. Is those orange bikes you see everywhere that you can rent, and here you can get a free 45-minute ride if you pledge to green action. But yeah, that's about it. There's a couple more, but they really fall under the same buckets here. And really you just have to take a bicycle or use public transportation, and then you can get all of these free things. But in the end, I think this is really great marketing for the city of Copenhagen and for some of these businesses in particular. But is it really making a big difference? I don't know. Perhaps it will if this project continues to evolve. But I mean, we just have to remember there are no free things in life, right? I mean, if you get a free cup of coffee at a restaurant, it's because that if you go there, get a free coffee, they hope that you will stay and spend more money. But I don't think it's a bad thing that there's a focus on being more sustainable while traveling. But what do you think? Let me know down in the comments. Okay, perhaps you are a little bit interested in what the daily life looks like here in Copenhagen. So let me bring you along for a few days. I'll also talk about the salaries here and give you a tour of my Copenhagen apartment. And finally, I'll share some of the things that I don't like about living here because, well, I want to give you that side of the story as well. Good morning from Copenhagen. We're in the middle of summer here, as you can see by the lovely rainy weather that we got. But the idea for this video is just to take you with me over the next couple of days of just me being and living here in Copenhagen, see what we get up to, and so you can get an idea what it's like living here in this city. Now I do actually, I guess, work for myself or do a lot of freelance work and so on. So I don't really have to get up early to meet at my job. I like my mornings to be pretty slow. So now it's like 10 AM and I've been up for a couple of hours and just watching some YouTube, checking some emails and drinking a lot of coffee. And that is also the plan here, just for the next little bit at least. And then I'm gonna go for a run. But before I go running, I just wanted to show you this awesome little coffee mug here. I got this from my old job and I have a couple of them, and the idea is just that they have kind of funny or unique Danish words on them. And so this one says Krudule, which I guess the direct translation would be something like gunpowder owl. And the meaning is that it's a person who just has a lot of energy. So like I've noticed with doing running and doing exercise in general, I am very good at being very inconsistent. So like I'll run or work out almost every day for like 3 months straight. And then the next 3 months, I'll do absolutely nothing. And I'll just keep being in that rhythm. So I'm actually very consistent
with my inconsistency. But another thing that I've noticed, because I turned 30 this year, and if I just compare it to like a couple of years ago, 4 or 5 years ago maybe, after periods of like not running for a few months and then coming back into it, I would like be right back in the shape where I was before. But now it's not quite the same. It takes a lot longer for me to like get back to where I was, and everything is just a little bit harder. Alright, so it's time to actually get some work done, and today I mainly have to do like some video editing, well, I guess several videos for a client. So I've just been planning and getting everything set up and ready for that, but I had actually also planned to go like out in the city a little bit and do some filming for another YouTube video that I'm working on. But of course it's raining a lot, and it looks like it's gonna be raining for most of the day, so probably not gonna do a lot of exploring and filming around Copenhagen today. But instead I thought I would go to a cafe to work from, because to be honest, when you work from home almost all the time, then you can get a little bit crazy just sitting here at the desk all day, every day, then eating here and then going to sleep right in the next room. And there is an awesome coffee shop just around the corner here called the Coffee Collective, and they have just a few great shops all around Copenhagen, and they make some really good coffee. Now the problem, I guess in general, with getting coffee out in Copenhagen is that it is really expensive. But I thought today we'd make an exception because of the weather. And I am back in the apartment again. It was just incredibly busy at the coffee shop. Like there was no place to sit. I don't think I've ever seen so many people there. So I got a to-go coffee instead. And this cost 50 Danish kroner. So I mean, you can see why I usually make my coffee at home. Because if you want like to drink a cup or two of these every single day, that really adds up. So just a quick little reality check if you plan on traveling to Copenhagen or Denmark or living here. It really rains a lot. This is peak summer, probably the busiest time where most tourists visit Copenhagen, and the weather is horrible. And I've made like quite a few like travel guides on how to travel Copenhagen, and in those videos the weather is almost always nice and sunny. But I mean, that's because it really sucks going out filming in the pouring rain. So if you plan on coming here, be prepared, bring a rain jacket, an umbrella, but also shorts and t-shirts because the weather is all over the place. I decided that now was a good time to do some filming for that other YouTube video, as I need to go to many different locations to film. So to start knocking them out, I hop on the metro and head to one of my favorite museums. This is Glyptoteket, probably the most aesthetic museum in all of Copenhagen. And Glyptoteket is home to a lot of art, but the main focus here is the sculptures. But beyond that, even the buildings and the rooms here are just beautiful. Oh, and a pro tourist tip: if you're looking to buy a souvenir when visiting Copenhagen, check out the shops at all the different museums. Usually they have items that are way more interesting than the fridge magnets you'll find at the standard souvenir shops. Okay, I finished up the videos that I needed to make, and now I think it's time for a late lunch. But let's just have a look in the fridge.
Because, yeah, it doesn't really look that good. It's completely empty.
So we're gonna have to brave it out in the rain to go to the supermarket and grab some food. But the reason why the fridge is all empty, and also why my girlfriend Sally is not at the apartment right now, is that we're actually moving. So we just sold this apartment that we've had for the past 4 or 5 years. And so we have to be out in about a month. But we already have our new place, and so we're kind of halfway moved. But now I'm just here in the apartment for this week because I have a lot of work here in Copenhagen. But I'll probably talk more about like why we sold our apartment and we're actually moving outside of Copenhagen. So I'll probably talk about why that is in a future video. So stick around if you want to hear why we would leave one of the best cities in the world. But let's go get some food. And perhaps this is a good occasion to maybe show you what a completely normal Danish person would eat for lunch pretty much every day. At least that's what I do.
This right here. Now I might buy the discount version of all of these, but essentially we eat rye bread with something on top.
Now, if you've watched any of my other videos from Copenhagen, where I talk about what you should eat when you're visiting Copenhagen or Denmark in general, this is it. Now, I usually refer to, I guess, the more fancy version that you would get if you're eating out, but I'm gonna show you the everyday person version.
And there you have it, a very simple lunch meal. And honestly, it looks kind of boring, but it is delicious.
And when I'm out traveling, like, this is the single thing that I miss the most, always. And I love how cheap and easy and fast it is just to make a very delicious lunch here. So if you're visiting Copenhagen and you're staying somewhere where you perhaps have a little kitchen, buy some bread, some butter, and some stuff to put on top. You won't regret it. And your budget won't either.
So it is the next day now, and I've basically just been doing some work all morning here, but now I'm getting ready to head out because I've started filming this video where basically I'm going to rate a lot of the attractions in Copenhagen so that you or tourists coming here can see like if they're worth visiting, and at least in my opinion. But let's jump down to the bicycle and head into town. Today is all about filming. I'll be going to a bunch of different locations, but I'll start at another museum. So this is the National Museum of Denmark, and this is where you'll learn basically everything about the history of Denmark up through time. Now, I'll be honest, I don't usually visit 2 museums a week. That is all for the video. But once in a while, it's great. And there are plenty of options, both paid and free, here in Copenhagen. I'll have a link in the description down below to the video where I actually explore and talk more about all of these places. But I will spoil it a little bit and share one of my favorite places, going up the tower of Vor Frelsers Kirke. Here you just get an incredible view of the city, and it's really cool and a little bit scary walking here on the outside of the spire, which does get really narrow towards the top. So I thought I'd just kind of add a little bit more context to living here in Copenhagen, like what's nice, what's perhaps not so nice. And now I've lived here for like 7-8 years, and before that I lived my whole life in a suburb just outside of Copenhagen. And I won't go like too deep, I guess, like going very in-depth about everything. Maybe I'll make that video another time, but some of the things that I really like is actually that the city is not too big, so that all of these attractions and cool things to see and do as a tourist or as a local, everything is basically within walking distance or at least biking distance. And that really also means that I simply bike everywhere. Like I live here in Frederiksberg, which is just a fantastic place to live. And at the same time, I'm just 10-15 minutes on my bicycle away from being in the city center. And of course, there's also just loads of cool things to do within walking distance of where I live here. Now, as I touched upon a little bit earlier, I guess my problem is that I don't use the city, I guess, that much. And a big factor of that is just that it is a little bit expensive to do a lot of the things. As we've seen, there are a lot of free things to do around here, but I guess just as a local, when you're living here, you don't, at least I don't go to all the free museums that often, or just hang out and see all these free places. So I guess I'm not that good at using the city, but again, also because to do a lot of things takes money. Another positive factor about living here is that almost all of my friends, all of my family live in Copenhagen or very close to Copenhagen. So again, just being able to hop on a bicycle, visit your friends, visit your family, that's awesome. But over the past, I guess, 10-15 years, I have actually tried living in a bunch of different countries and cities around the world. And to be honest, Copenhagen is probably one of the best places to live. At least if you have a good job that pays you very well, because living here is really expensive. Renting an apartment, even buying an apartment, just crazy expensive, and of course living expenses are high as well. But of course, in turn, people here do make more money.
Denmark is one of the richest countries in the world and is also up there top 5, top 10, depending on who you ask, of the highest average salary in the world. But how much do normal people make, and what are some examples of salaries in certain jobs? Well, I have the answer for you today. I have 10 different payslips from actual people who work different jobs all around Denmark, and we'll see what kind of job you need to have to make like $10,000-$15,000 per month. But in Denmark, we actually kind of suck at talking about our salaries. It's a little bit taboo to talk about how much money you make. Even with like your friends and family or co-workers, you don't really talk about money in Denmark. But perhaps there's been a little bit of a shift, at least for some people, in the past couple of years, and that is how I can make this video, as a lot of people are sharing their payslips on Reddit. So that's where we'll head today here on the computer. So we head to this subreddit called DK Lønseddel, which means payslip basically. And here a lot of people just share their payslip. And let's just jump into the first example I found, and it is a doctor. And at least in Denmark, we have this, I guess, belief that doctors, they just make a buttload of money. And they can, but usually it's after a long education and after they have worked for a very long time. And usually working in the private sector is a lot more profitable for a doctor. So here we have a payslip from a doctor who has worked for 8 years, and actually this payslip is rather simple compared to some of the other ones we'll look at, but basically we want to look at this number down here, which is just the actual amount that people are getting paid after paying all the taxes and everything. So this doctor makes around 26,000 Danish kroner per month after taxes and all that. And to be honest, that sounds very low in Denmark for a doctor. But let's move on to the second example, and this person makes a lot of money. So this person is a 39-year-old CTO in a company and has been with this company for 1 year. And we can see that this person has around 84,000 Danish kroners paid out per month, which is quite a lot, I think. And if you just want to get a quick glimpse at how much taxes we actually pay in Denmark, you can just see here that I guess the number up here is, I guess, the base salary, the base monthly salary this person gets. And you can see that's basically double of what this person has paid out every month. So we pay a lot of taxes in Denmark. Now, of course, being a CTO in a company, there's probably a lot of responsibility, and this person probably has a pretty good skill set and provides a lot of value for this company, but not a bad salary. All right, on to the next one. This person is 25 years old and is an IT specialist at Novo Nordisk, probably the largest company in Denmark. And furthermore, this person shares that he or she has ADHD and autism, so getting a job that was the right fit hasn't been easy. But we'll see here that this person makes almost 27,000 Danish kroner per month as an IT specialist, being only 25 years old. So we can see that this person actually makes more than the doctor does, which is kind of interesting. And I think that this range of salary here is just around the average for people in Denmark. So with a salary like this, you can live a pretty good normal life in Denmark. Okay, let's move on to the Danish army. So lately in Denmark, there's been a lot of talk about, well, funding the army and basically how it's kind of falling apart and all employees are leaving the army and no one wants to be there. And let's be honest, a big part of that is the salary. So let's have a look at this. What is it? Maybe a staff sergeant, I think, with more than 7 years in the army. And here we'll find the amount down here, which is just around 19,000 Danish kroner per month, which honestly is not a lot, especially with the amount of experience and responsibility. And even if you move up to being an officer in the army, they only make a few thousand Danish kroner more per month. So in my opinion, it's really no wonder why the Danish army can't find the amount of staff that they need and that they can't keep the staff that they have. It simply doesn't pay enough for the amount of time and effort and skill that you put in and responsibility that you have. All right, next one. I think this one is kind of interesting because at least when you hear about things in the US, you always talk about, someone is making minimum wage at McDonald's. It's like one of the worst paying jobs that you could probably think of. How is it working at McDonald's in Denmark? How much do you make? Well, here we have an answer. This person is a supervisor at McDonald's and has been a supervisor for 1 year. And this person is 28 years old. And here, this person has in hand every month 27,000 Danish kroner. So again,
this supervisor working at McDonald's makes more than the doctor that we looked at earlier. So really that's pretty good, I think. In Denmark, McDonald's and, well, other companies actually have to pay decent salaries to people. Okay, how about a school teacher? Well, here we have it. This is a school teacher who has worked for 10 years. And this person has around 25,000 Danish kroner paid out every month. So again, around that average in Denmark, perhaps a little bit below. But another thing that we actually don't quite get from that one number that we've been looking at is pension payments. In most jobs, you actually get that the company will pay a certain amount to your pension every month. And here that amount is around 17%. So you can see it's almost 7,000 Danish kroners on top of the salary that you're getting. So essentially the salary is a bit higher than those 25,000, or quite a bit higher actually, but all of that goes to your pension. Okay, but here's a fun one. How about if you work as a temp at a school in Denmark? This person is 20 years old working as a temp, and I think we can quickly see that this person actually makes the exact same as the actual school teacher, which I mean is awesome for this person. That's quite a lot of money, especially if you're 20 years old. But perhaps then there's something wrong with the payment of the actual school teacher, as they probably have a longer education and a lot more experience and perhaps deserve a little bit of a higher salary. Now, of course, being a temp, you might run into a lot more uncertainty. There might be months where you have a lot of work and then months with not a lot of work. So of course, you have to take that into account. But I mean, 20 years old, making as much as a normal teacher, good on you. Okay, next up we have an analyst in a bank. And this person is 28 years old and makes almost 31,000 Danish kroner per month. Working in the financial sector in general in Denmark is pretty lucrative. So if you work like in the finance or IT consulting, those jobs usually pay quite well. A job that is often debated in Denmark that doesn't pay that well, especially compared to working hours, work environment and so on, is being a nurse. So let's have a look at this nurse here. So this person recently finished their education and works 32 hours per week. The norm in Denmark is 37 hours per week, but like sometimes in jobs like this that are like super demanding, people just get stressed actually working as a nurse. And so you'll see sometimes that people will work less hours just to, well, be able to manage it. And this person makes 16,600 Danish kroner per month. So you can see why nurses often complain about the low pay. That is not a lot of money here in Denmark. But I have another nurse as an example, this time one with 12 years of experience. And you can see that this nurse actually makes quite a lot more. Now, this particular person also works quite a lot in the evening and during the night. So there's, of course, an extra payment for that really brings this amount up to around 32,000 Danish kroner per month, which is definitely a pretty good salary in Denmark. But like we can see that this person has like 29 hours of evening work and 58 hours of night work. So in Denmark, we really like our windmills and our wind energy. So this person is a project manager in this industry and has 4 years of working experience and makes almost 35,000 Danish kroner per month. And I think that's pretty nice salary for a project manager. Okay, this next one I took in because it's kind of interesting because, I mean, you can see that we pay a lot of taxes in Denmark. I mean, most of these salaries, you basically see that people pay almost 40-50% of their salaries in taxes. And of course, those taxes go to a lot of different things. We have free education, free healthcare, but we also have a pretty good welfare system. So this person here shared how much they get being on welfare as a parent, because you do get a bit more when you're a parent. So being on welfare, this person gets around 11,000 Danish kroner per month. And this last payslip that I have to show you today works as a parking attendant, parking guard. This person will write you a ticket if you park in the wrong place. And we are very strict with that here in Denmark. And this person will get paid almost 20,000 Danish kroner per month. All right, I hope you found it interesting hearing a bit more and seeing some real life examples of how much people actually make working pretty normal jobs here in Denmark. This is what $500,000 can get you in Copenhagen, Denmark. Welcome to our apartment
I live here with my girlfriend who is filming and occasionally a few furballs. So this apartment is 61 square meters and has 1 bedroom. So coming into the apartment, this is the main entrance. We have a small little entryway just to put your shoes and your jackets. Then we have 100 doors here for the bathroom and here for the back staircase. But the apartment really opens up immediately, and you can see here we have some really nice details here with some exposed brick and an old like wooden beam and from the old structure. So this apartment building was actually built in 1902, I think, and we are located now on the top floor, so the 5th floor, which also means, as the building itself is very old, that there is no elevator. So we have big quads in this home.
And butts.
So the apartment was like an old dry loft, which they then in the 1950s, I think, converted into an apartment. But let's start by checking out the kitchen, which is right behind you. So it's actually a pretty nice, decently sized kitchen here in such a small apartment. Of course, you got like these very slanted walls as we're on the top floor, and that does take away a bit of the space. Pretty hard to chop your vegetables over here. So the apartment was, I think, last renovated like in the 90s. And so the kitchen that it had when we moved in was really ugly. But instead of completely stripping the kitchen and putting in a new one, we just like painted over the cabinets and replaced the handles, replaced the oven, replaced the dishwasher, and now it looks relatively new. Also replaced like the countertop and the sink. So that was a great way for us to save a lot of money, and I mean, it looks all right. So the dining room and living room area is really nice and open and feels pretty big in a relatively small apartment. So it's basically just one big room, but it's kind of nicely sectioned off with this big couch, which is probably where we spend most of our time. On this side of the apartment though, like the slanted walls are not as bad as on the other side. Like they start a little bit higher and they're not as steep, so it doesn't really feel like it impacts the size of the room. And the skylights on this side are really nice and brings in just a ton of light. So it's a really bright apartment and can also get very hot in the summer. Now, of course, since it's not a huge apartment, storage is always gonna be an issue. So this bench here is just a great storage option and also a great bed, it seems like. A perk of being on the 5th floor, the top floor here, and having these slanted walls is that we have just complete privacy. And there's like not even the people on the other side here can look into our apartment. So that's kind of nice. Can run around in the undies. We do have perhaps a bit of a style confusion in this apartment with one side being very minimalist and clean, and then another side here being very messy and colorful. But I mean, it's like a process of upgrading and changing our style. And I mean, that just the TV is probably over 10 years old. Now, since the building is very old and the apartment was last renovated in like the 90s, there's just a lot of weird quirks in this apartment. Like here we have 2 different types of flooring on each side here, and there is a little bit of a height difference as well. And there's also just a lot of weird places where things are just getting a bit old. But I mean, if the apartment was newly renovated and very nice, it would also have been a very different price point. But let's quickly head into the bathroom behind me, which is actually a pretty nice sized bathroom for an apartment in Copenhagen. Now, the price might seem a bit high for an old and pretty small apartment, but really the biggest factor on the price here is the location. But before we talk more about that, let's head into the bedroom. I mean, it's a decent bedroom. We got a pretty good sized bed, and again with the storage we have a lot of these drawers underneath the bed just to utilize the space. And then we have a big closet for all our clothes. We even have
a desk which used to be a working desk, but now Sally has completely overtaken it. And again, in this room, the slanted walls can be a bit more limiting, and I think that's why I sleep on that side, and Sally, who is just a bit shorter, she sleeps on this side. But she does bump her head once in a while. So a weird fact about, well, Denmark, I guess, and how we talk about apartments is that this apartment we would actually call a 2-bedroom apartment or 2-room apartment, because we basically count the living room as a room. So that can be a bit confusing because there is only 1 bedroom, but we call it a 2-bedroom. Another great fact about this apartment is that it's really, really quiet here. We're like on a side street which is very quiet and has one-way traffic, and really only the residents will pass through the street. And on this side we have like a huge yard that we share with all the other buildings in this block. Of course, it also helps that we're on the top floor, so we have no noisy upstairs neighbors with kids running around. It gets really, really quiet here. And of course, another thing that helps with that is the neighborhood. So let's talk about that. The apartment is located in Frederiksberg, which is one of the more expensive areas in Copenhagen. And this particular neighborhood that we are in is also just really, really popular place to live. The metro is right next by. There's tons of nice restaurants, bars and cafes, and also a bunch of good schools and facilities around here are great. So it is a very attractive neighborhood for people to live in, and this apartment is definitely on the more low end, so one of the more affordable apartments in this area. Copenhagen is a pretty expensive city to buy real estate in, and there's a big sentiment in Denmark that it's also too expensive here in Copenhagen. But perhaps if you compare it a bit to other capitals or major cities around in Europe, it's not that bad at all. The fact is, Copenhagen is not really getting any bigger, and more people want to come and live here. So inevitably, that's gonna drive the prices up, at least in the longer term. And though it might not be for everyone, I really love this apartment's charm. It has all the unique quirks, the slanted walls and the weird layout. For me, it's great that it's pretty unique. A lot of the new apartments being built in Copenhagen really all look the same. It just feels very copy-paste, a lot of those apartments. And I guess that does help save money in the construction. We bought this apartment about 3 years ago now for just around $450,000 US. And realistically, right now it would be worth just about $500,000 US. Is Denmark, and in particular Copenhagen, one of the best places to live in the whole world? Well, probably, but us Danes, we really like to complain. So that is exactly what I'm gonna do today. Here are the 10 reasons why I hate, or at least dislike, living in Copenhagen, Denmark. Okay, so first off, it's just really expensive. And I mean, in Copenhagen, this is only exaggerated even further. Prices for homes and for renting are just really high. Like if you want to rent, let's just say a 2 or 3 bedroom apartment in Copenhagen, and you don't like have any connections, you're just a regular person, you could probably look at paying around 15,000 Danish kroner per month. So that's around $2,000. And if you go for something smaller, like a 1 bedroom or 2 bedroom apartment, I mean, if you're lucky, you can find something like 9 or 10,000 Danish kroner per month. But for most people, that will still be a huge chunk of their monthly salary. And if you want to buy something, it's just also really expensive, and especially for younger people who want to buy their first home, it can be really difficult to actually get approved for a loan for that amount of money. Now, if you go outside of Copenhagen, and especially if you go like, let's say an hour or more away from Copenhagen or some of the largest cities around Denmark, rent and prices for homes get a lot more affordable. But of course, all the universities and a lot of jobs are around the big cities, so it is what it is. But it's not just prices for homes and rent that is high, it's also just everything else. Buying groceries, food, experiences, like going to the movies, eating out. It's just expensive. Like the other day, I just went to grab a burger, some fries and a beer at this like hip street food-ish kind of place in Copenhagen. and it cost me like 210 Danish kroner or like $30 just for that for one person. Safe to say, like, I don't eat out very often here in Denmark. And another great way to measure this is how much you have to pay for a latte, of course. Now, we actually have a pretty cool coffee culture here in Denmark, and you can find a lot of awesome coffee places that make really high quality coffee. But it will also cost you.
So I managed to get myself a cup of coffee here at this place called Dallas, just around the corner here. It's just a small little coffee place, and it is actually really good. But I guess the problem is it was 45 Danish kroner, so that's like $6 to $7. And like, I mean, in most of the coffee places, that is just the price for coffee here in Copenhagen. It is just really expensive.
Now, of course, to be able to afford all of this, Danes also get a pretty high salary. And my next video will actually be about like how much people get paid here in Denmark, especially in just like normal jobs. And we're gonna have a look at a lot of real examples and real pay slips from a lot of different people just to see how much people make. So make sure to subscribe if you want to see that as well. The weather in Denmark is pretty sad. Most of the year it is just cold, gray and rainy. I mean, now it's summer. It's just been raining for the past few days. And it's kind of cold. When the weather is nice though, it's really amazing. And especially in Copenhagen, it's just a completely different vibe. And the city really comes alive. But usually summertime in Denmark is really awesome. We got like very long days, so the sun rises really early and sets super late. So these like very late evenings and long sunsets. It's just beautiful. But it's that other like 3/4 of a year that's problematic. Like, let's say you just have a normal job. During the winter, when you meet at your job, it's dark. And then when you're off and go home, it's dark again. So it's just sad. And winter depression is a real thing here in Denmark. And now me and my girlfriend spent quite a few years just traveling the world, especially in warmer countries, because the bad weather is just really a big part of why I don't like living in Denmark. Now, if we're lucky, May until September, it can be kind of nice. Of course, it depends a lot, especially on how much it rains during those months. But then from October until April, it just really sucks. Now, the next thing that I really don't like about living here in Denmark is that I think that the nature here in Denmark is kind of terrible. Now, like in Copenhagen, you just have a lot of parks, which I guess is fair since it's just a big city. But even then, like going outside the city, you don't really have a lot of like cool places in nature to go to on a trip or just to relax or escape into nature. And like what we do have is kind of boring. So let me explain. So Denmark is flat, like really, really flat. Like we have no mountains or anything like that, or any cool landscapes. So things like going on a hike just kind of sucks because you don't really have that payoff at the end, that grand vista or awesome viewpoint that you hike up to. You just hike through a trail or alongside a road or something. It's just boring. And the second thing is that we don't have like a lot of forest here in Denmark. I think the number of like the area amount covered of the country is like 15%, which may sound like a lot, but probably a lot of it is like for like lumber mills or whatever, or it's just like a lot of small patches here and there which you can't really go into or use as a forest just as a normal person. Now, as you can probably tell, I'm not really in Copenhagen filming this video today, and that's because I want to show you the real issue that I have with the nature here in Denmark. So I've come today to the island of Møn, which is actually an area of Denmark that has a lot of awesome nature, at least compared to other parts of the country. But it's also just really good at demonstrating the issue that I have. So this right here, this is how most of the nature looks like in Denmark. And you know, it might look a little bit idyllic and peaceful, you know, a little bit of rolling hills and grass. But in my opinion, it's also just really boring, because if you go outside of the cities, this is exactly how it looks like everywhere. And also consider that we are now in summer, and it's also about like being sunset time, so it does look perhaps a little bit nicer. But look, 60% of Denmark is covered in farms and fields just like this one here. 60% of our whole country. Like that's, to me, that's an insane amount. Like compared to our neighbors Norway and Sweden, the number is like 5% or something. Of course, they're much bigger countries, so we can't really compare. But still, if you want to be in nature, 60% of our country is just covered in fields that are pretty boring and that I, as just a normal guy, can't really enjoy. I mean, I can't go out and
for a hike or have fun in the fields or something like that. So to me, that really sucks. Nature is really boring because it's just fields that cover most of our country. In Denmark, we have rules about everything. And I mean, of course, that can be a good thing, but we're also just very, very strict with those rules. Like if you have a parking ticket and you go just a minute or two over the time that you've put in, you'll get a fine. But what I dislike even more is that us Danes, we really care if other people are following the rules. Honestly, we're just a bunch of little snitches. Did you spot your neighbor putting the food waste in the cardboard trash can? Oof, he's in big trouble. But we're also not like very confrontational here in Denmark. So instead of actually going over to the neighbor and saying, hey, you put the trash in the wrong bin, no. We'll call up the municipality and actually like tell on him and hope that they will take action. And again, it's probably a good thing in many cases, but personally, I just like things being a bit more relaxed. So in Denmark, we have this thing called Janteloven, or the law of Jante, which is not really a law, it's more of an unwritten rule or unofficial rule, or how you want to put it. I mean, at this point, it's basically just a part of our culture. And the basic idea of this Janteloven is that you should not think that you're special. You should not think that you're better than anyone else, that you're smarter than anyone else, so not really stand out in any way. And again, sure, that can be fine, and it probably helps create a society where we are a bit more equal or have equal opportunity. But I mean, we aren't all the same. But we are kind of then, through our culture, just really taught to fit in. So if you are different and you show it, that's not often a good thing. Like, we don't like people bragging about their achievements or what they've accomplished or something. You know, people should keep that to themselves. So it also really creates this weird relationship we have in Denmark with successful people. Like, for example, we are not very great at celebrating entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship. And so if someone has built a successful business and perhaps made a lot of money, it's always a bit like, she probably inherited some money or knew someone, got lucky, or perhaps did something illegal. Because standing out like that is just not necessarily seen as a good thing. And that, I think, really comes down to how this Janteloven is kind of implemented in our culture. And I think this Janteloven also plays kind of a big part in just making sure that everyone in Denmark is basically the same person. Like, we all wear the same clothes, we all listen to the same music and have whatever hobby is popular at the time. Just follow all the trends and talk about the things that are trending and that you should care about. Because if you do something that's a little bit different and outside the norm, that's a little weird. And people might mock you, might even bully you for doing it. Like, just for being yourself. And so everyone just tries to fit in and everyone ends up being exactly the same. And that's just a little bit boring. And of course, it also sucks if people have to like hide who they really are, or, you know, they don't do the thing that they would actually want to do just because it would be a little weird for other people. It can be a little bit hard in Denmark making new friends. I think this is especially true for foreigners coming to live here. Generally, us Danes are known for like being pretty cold and like hard to get to know. And that is true, like, but once you get to know a Dane, you know, we're very open and very warm and welcoming. But it is that initial step that's hard to breach, I guess. Like, it's very normal that people just, you know, make friends through school, university, and their job, and then they just stick with those friends. Like, if you are a foreigner or 29-year-olds and, you know, want to make new friends, it's really not that easy. I think the best option is to somehow become part of something. Like, that's when it's easiest to, like, get to know us Danes. So, like, do some sports or doing some activity where you'll be in the same room as with the same people several times. Like, that's basically how you make friends in Denmark. But I think another explanation of this is just Danes are just super busy all the time. Of course, all people are different, but generally Danes are just really busy with themselves. Which again, might not be a bad thing, but it just makes it hard to get to know someone new if they barely have time to see you.
So this one I think is kind of funny. Like we have this weird self-image here in Denmark. And I think like one good example of this is how we see ourselves in regards to sustainability. Like that is a real important thing for Danes. And if you kind of go online and read a little bit, what is Denmark known for? Sustainability. And if you ask Danes what they care about, it's sustainability. But at the same time, like per capita, we have like a really high like CO2 emissions. We buy so much useless crap, like a new phone every year, new clothes, throw it away. Now all the rage is this Temu, like just cheap products from China, like let's go. We love it. And sure, we probably do a lot of good things in general for the environment and for sustainability, but like it's not enough to keep up with all those agreements the politicians have made, like Paris Agreement or whatever they're called. And that's another point, like we see ourselves as like an example. Because we're such a small country, it often comes up like, hey, okay, doesn't really matter what we do. You know, the pessimist will say, but then, you know, the people who really care about sustainability will go, yeah, but we have to lead by example so others can follow in our footsteps. But I mean, I don't think we're doing that great to begin with to really be an example. So what I'm saying is, I think that in Denmark we really perhaps overrate ourselves a bit. Like we really think we are awesome and amazing. And in some points I'm sure we are, but we're perhaps not that great. We have so many taxes. Now, of course, we touched on, you know, we have free healthcare, free education, a pretty good welfare system. Nice. All of that, of course, comes at a cost that we pay quite a lot of taxes. We do have a very high, like, income tax. Generally, it's probably around like 50%. Of course, it varies depending on exactly how much you make and so on. And most Danes actually happily pay their taxes. They think, yeah, you know, they can see the value that you get back from what you're paying. But my problem lies more with I guess the amount of taxes, because it's not just income tax. We have a lot of different taxes on everything. And also some of them are just plain stupid. So no, we have a VAT of like 25% on all products and services. We have different taxes on different kind of products, sugar, alcohol, and so on. Like cars have a pretty high tax. And one stupid example here is how, I don't know, like 20 or 30 years ago, they built a big bridge in Denmark to connect the country. I mean, awesome. So the way the government financed this bridge was to take out a loan to build the bridge. And then the idea was to have people pay to cross the bridge, and over time that money would pay back the loan. And once the loan was paid back, the price of crossing the bridge would be reduced just to, you know, to keep the bridge operational and for maintenance and so on. But later on, the government actually found out that this bridge makes quite a lot of money. So instead of just paying back the loan, the government could take the money in this bridge company that the state owns and use that for other infrastructure projects. How smart is that? So today, the price of crossing the bridge hasn't gone down. And essentially, it's just a hidden tax because the government then uses the money of crossing the bridge for projects that they would normally use our taxes on. So kind of a hidden tax that really targets, you could say, a certain group that I guess lives in that area or crosses the bridge regularly. Okay, those were really all the reasons I have for, well, perhaps hate is a strong word here. Hopefully you can take all of this with a grain of salt. I mean, there is a reason why I do still live here and not in another country. I do really like it here. And I'll probably make a video about more of the positives later on. If you enjoyed this video, consider hitting the like button. It really helps me out. And subscribe if you want to see more videos from Copenhagen and from Denmark in general. Thank you so much for watching.